Hi, I'm Vicki Lowe. Welcome to your Senior Center. Today's guest is Bill Keegan, our town manager. Welcome, Bill.
Nice to see you again, Vicki.
Yep, Bill's here to talk about the town hall project that we're all going to need to be well informed about when it's time to go to town meeting. And Bill has the unique perspective of being someone who has fresh eyes looking at the town hall and what the needs are. So. So, Bill, welcome. You want to talk a little bit about your impressions, or?
Well, yeah, no, it's well. First of all, thank you for having me on the show today. And I wanted to just say that I've been in town almost 6 months now, so I think I've passed the probation period, if you will. But the first issue that I faced when I came here was, of course, the town hall issue, and it's not a strange issue to anyone. It's been around for a long time. In fact, I've seen reports go back as much as 15 years in terms of how people have been trying to address this one issue. I think it went back even before the new police fire center facility was built, because they were trying to address the police station at the same time, and why that was such a major concern at the time. So the police station got addressed, but the town hall never did. And as a result, the situation at town hall has sort of continued to evolve into something that really isn't acceptable in terms of the way it should be built today. The building currently doesn't meet today's standards in many different ways, and so we don't have enough meeting space. We don't have the office space is pretty cramped. We just haven't really established a modern working environment that should be in place for a community of this nature. This is a great community. There's so many things I've really been pleased to see when I first arrived here, and there are a lot of things that we've done well here. This is one of the things. This is one issue that's sort of lingering that needs to get addressed, and we're hopefully on a track now to try and do that.
Well, I want to applaud you for having such an open process for people to be able to be parts of committees and really air the concerns, and there's it's just totally transparent process, and you're providing a lot of information. One of the things that I think people aren't really aware of possibly is how many departments are housed at the town hall?
Well, currently there's 13 different departments housed at town hall. That is likely to change over the next year, maybe down to about 11. Though the total number of employees in the building is about 34. And I think that's it doesn't sound like that's a large number, per se, but the town hall is the center of the town's government. So therefore, it's not just about those 34 folks that work in and out of that building. It's about the fact that this is where a lot of the government issues get addressed, which means there's a lot of meetings there. There's supposed to be and a lot of people come in and get their tax issues addressed, or their building permits, or any kind of major projects reviewed. It's in getting licensing, all those things that are integral to local government. And so therefore, it's not just about those 34 folks. It's a much broader perspective. So a lot of people, literally thousands of people, will go through those doors over the course of several years, and so therefore, it's important that the building is able to accommodate the kind of traffic that goes through those doors on a daily basis.
I know that there's been a lot of discussion about the private space for people to be, when you think of 11 departments, and if each of them have confidential things they're speaking about with town residents, especially in an age where a lot of things are technology based, as a senior center director.
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely.
I feel like a senior shouldn't have to try to struggle and try to work their way through, navigating the internet to get an answer when they could just walk in.
Right.
But they also don't want to walk in and have everybody be able to hear what their business is. So I just think 11 departments, many of them having confidential issues they're talking about with people, is an issue that needs to be recognized, I guess.
I think that's really well put. I mean, the town hall is, it's not just your traditional office space, and I think a lot of people think of it, it can be run, pretty much like a private sector business. Well, in some respects it can. I'll never say that it can't, but But there are many aspects of it that they can't, and because there are confidential issues that, some that people don't want to talk about, and they're not confidential in the truest sense of the law per se, but they are in terms of the personal nature of people,
Right.
How they want to react.
Respecting a
when it's
person's
privacy.
privacy.
Right, that's right.
Rather than, bound by laws of confidentiality.
Exactly.
It's respecting people's privacy.
That's exactly right, and I think that's really what we're trying to achieve. At the same time, having that balance effect where, we're trying to, keep that open viewing area so people can sort of, cross-pollinate. I like to use that term a lot, where people will work with each other on different issues. But it's important that, issues such as veterans issues, we've got issues with Board of Health issues, there's tax issues. People don't want to talk about their tax situation with others, so they want to be able to talk about that privately. So we want to provide that space so they can properly do that.
Yeah. I know that there have been some efforts to have open houses at Town Hall so that town residents can come in and go through and look at what the conditions are.
Right.
They haven't been very well attended.
Right.
I know that we have some slides about conditions. Would you mind going through the slides?
Sure,
and
absolutely.
Just tell us about what the space is and what the issue is with that space.
Sure, I'd be glad to do that. And so if we sort of roll those pictures, I think we can go through them. So here we have this used to be the actual selectmen's chambers, and you can see now it's just it's an internal meeting space, which by the way is really the only major meeting space we have in the entire building, which is actually, it's really dysfunctional in many ways because it's not private. It's still, actually, there are multiple offices right behind those walls.
The petitions,
The
right.
petitions.
I've actually been at meetings there
Right.
where that needed to be private, and people had to actually leave
leave
their
that space.
cubicles
Right.
so that the discussions could be private.
Exactly,
So, yeah,
yeah.
that's
So that's
certainly not ideal.
And that sort of just depicts that. So the next slide, please. Okay, this is on the other side of that petition. This actually is the planning department, where the secretary, the assistant planner, and the town planner is actually behind that second petition. So you can see this is kind of a very tiny space that's being occupied by three separate individuals. And this is just another angle of the wall. And if folks were in the town hall in the old selectmen's meeting space, you can see that there's actually the case where we have many archived items, historical items, and they never really get seen because they're behind in the back of that room. This is the men's bathroom. You can see that they tried to make it ADA compliant, and the way they did it was to take the door off. So it's actually kind of interesting. So it gets a little dicey sometimes when you want to use the bathroom. So this is the ladies' bathroom, and it's as you see, it's pretty tiny. That's really not even really fully ADA compliant because of the way the doors are. They're pretty small, and so. And this is just the sink area. We're pretty limited in space, so a lot of things get stored underneath there. It's a very, very limited area. And this is just the hallways. You can see how narrow the hallways are. And typically, these spaces are wider because in a public space like that, we have to accommodate folks who have ADA compliance issues. So we try to make that space a little bit bigger, but that's pretty narrow as it is. And that's the old design of a building in the 60s. This is actually, believe it or not, the converted front door, where if you were to look at the outside of the building and look in, the front door doesn't even actually open because they actually they actually closed it off and and boarded it off so they could actually create space for a copy area and mail space because we simply didn't have the space. Next slide, please. This is the front entranceway, which is really the back of the building that leads into the parking lot. And you can see that this actually isn't that bad looking in terms of, but it is dated, and the counter space is actually not ADA compliant. So I think that's important that we recognize that if it's too high.
Yeah.
And so if somebody were to come in a wheelchair, it would be difficult for them to actually be serviced at the counter. And again, it shows the narrow doorways that we have. That don't allow people to go in properly, and it sort of limits the ability to access many of these offices. Again, showing the cramped conditions. In this particular area, we actually house three people in this area, including the animal control officer, which is actually behind those cabinets. So you can see that's really not an adequate space for that. And then on the other side is the assistant inspector, and the doorway leads into the actual building commissioner's office. But you can see we have very limited space and a lot of file cabinets. This is the downstairs planning area, plan area actually, I should say, which is downstairs in the basement. And all this, the downstairs is actually used now as really storage area. And this area, and we're in the process of actually cleaning up a lot of these records, so we're actually going to try and address some of those records issues. You can see the chairs are being stacked on top of the table because we went through the rainy season just recently. We're concerned that we'd run into a water problem, and we want to make sure that we ran into and we further damaged any stuff downstairs.
Because the water was literally running.
Water was literally running in the
through.
door. Now, it hasn't been as bad recently, and I think we've done some things to try to offset that. But this is the downstairs area, which used to be the police department, and you can see again the narrow corridors and the ceilings. And it's been suggested that we can actually address that if we built this properly, we have to deal with seismic issues in the new building requirements, and there's no HVAC throughout the entire building. Or there's no air conditioning rather. There's no vents. You can see in the ceiling areas, those are only 8-foot ceilings in many cases, and so as a result, if you try and cover those, it's going to be even lower. If you try to cover those wires, it's going to be even lower.
We'll be hitting our hair on the top.
That's right. So, and you can see the dehumidifier, which of course indicates, of course, the area that's downstairs is still wet at times, and we have to keep that running constantly. Again, storage area downstairs on the first floor because we're limited in space. But we are working on the records piece, so hopefully that will be cleaned up a little bit. Again, the old cells are downstairs, so if we were going to renovate, we would have to take all these out. We don't need these anymore. And if that were to be the case, of course, that's an expense that has to be considered as well. The famous boat that was that I think our building commissioner actually brought into a selectmen's meeting one day, showing that this is how we actually got around to the first floor one time because it was so bad down there. And you can see that the stairways leading off the back. This actually leads into my office on the right-hand side. But you can see the stairways, and there is no elevator in the building. So as a result, that's going to have to be addressed. Now, this is actually in the outside selectman's office, where the two administrative assistants and the executive assistant to the manager and board of selectmen sits. You can see the walls are starting to deteriorate. I mean,
and that's water damage.
That's
right?
water damage, yeah. So, and we're doing some things now to try and offset with try and put some repairs into the roof and also on the gutter system, but the water's getting behind the brick and the walls, and so as a result, it's starting to deteriorate the walls.
And in terms of health hazards for
well,
employees?
Those are concerns to us. I mean, we certainly are very concerned about that. But so far, it's not been determined that we have to evacuate the building. But we're trying to get to the point where we don't have to do that, be forced to do that. Right. You can see the water conditions continue to. This is actually the treasurer's office, which is across the hall. So it's an entire back wall. It's on both sides of the building. So you can see that's really being a problem. And you see the windows. The windows are starting to rot around the edges as well. It's in tough shape. This is just a crack above one of the windows in the treasurer's office. Things are starting to escalate in terms of deterioration. Again, further wall damage just from the water that's getting behind the brick. Next slide, please. And this, again, so this is just area in the treasurer collector's office where we've got lots of cabinets, but very limited space. We're required to maintain a lot of records, but we're in the process of trying to manage those records because obviously there's a lot of records that we'd like to try and turn into digitize and put everything on computer, more things on computer. Next slide, please. And then I think this particular slide is important for a lot of reasons. One, if you take a look at the outside of the building, it's actually an attractive building. So I think, from our perspective, that it makes sense that we want to try and recapture a lot of that look when we build the new building. And that is the recommendation, by the way, of the working group, is to build a new building. So we want to recapture, because we do like that. I mean, a lot of us like that. So there's no issue with that particular concern. And this is the back of the building. But you can notice the window air conditioners and all the windows, because there is no central HVAC.
Right.
So, And then on the other side, you can see the parking lot. And to see how the parking lot slopes towards the building, which sort of contributes to the water problem, we're going to set the new building back and try and regrade that so it doesn't become an issue. And of course, the garages will be will be taken out, and the building itself will be gone.
And doesn't water just rush under those doors sometimes?
It has, yeah. But we've actually addressed that to some degree. The new DPW director, Roger Hill, has addressed some of that, so it isn't as bad. But you can see the rotting above the around the gutter lines. You know, you can see how that's actually starting to deteriorate.
Yeah.
And it's been one of these situations where, you know, people say, well, why haven't you done more repairs? Well, this whole issue has been under debate for 4 or 5 years recently, where, so the question then becomes, okay, do we spend good money after bad?
Right.
At some point, you have to kind of weigh those questions out. And the position that has been taken is that we've done some things, but we didn't want to spend a lot of money, because especially if either renovation or new, we would have spent some significant money on the building. But I want to be clear, though, that the working group is recommending a new building. There are just too many things that have to be addressed in this existing building for it to really make sense. Yeah. And it's been said by one of our members, one of the working group members, that it's cheaper to go that route. And a lot of us aren't convinced of that. And the reason why is because all you have to do is look at this old house. Once you start taking walls apart and start looking into further removal of materials in the building, you'll find that budget starts to creep up much further than people had first anticipated.
I was reading an editorial, a letter that someone else had written in the paper, and the person said, well, if the outside shell is worth $1.7 million, why would we want to destroy that? And it's like, is it worth 1.7? Well, a shell of a building, is that really worth 1.7? I mean, how does that?
That's the major question here. Is like, because none of us really have reached that conclusion, because and if you were able, other than this one person, so if you were to you saw how the water is getting behind the brick and the walls inside, so you have to really wonder, is there further damage beyond that? And you wouldn't be able to do that unless you actually took apart a lot of the facade that's actually on the building. So at the end of the day, we keep asking ourselves, what are you really going to save here?
Right.
And I think that's really the bottom line. So we believe, and the working group believes this unanimously except for one, is that this is the most responsible way to spend the taxpayers' dollars. And that's really what it comes down to, is that at the end of the day, and I was the objective guy here because I had no knowledge of this process at all up to the first day I walked in the office. And I looked at this project, and I've been involved in many different building projects in the course of my career. As I look at this building, and as I talk to other experts in the industry, they all say the same thing. What is it that you want to save, and what's the redeeming value you want to save in this building? It's true that you can renovate major federal buildings, state buildings, buildings that have some historic significance, which is they're built with certain materials such as marble or granite, or have mahogany finishes inside. You would definitely want to save those, because you can't replace that today. I mean, it'd be just cost prohibitive to do that.
Right.
So I think really the point that we want to drive home is that, as we look at this building, there's nothing really that's redeemable. There's no particular types of significant materials that were put into this building initially that would lead us to go in the direction of renovating.
And as you say, the outside of the building is attractive.
It is.
I know that when this question came up for town meeting a couple of town meetings ago, that there was an artist rendering of the new town hall, and that some seniors said to me, I would never want a building that looks like this, but we don't really have an artist rendering of anything,
we don't.
do
No,
we?
no, we don't. And I think it's misleading at best to tell people that there is a rendition of this building right now, because there is no such rendering. Whatever rendering was done prior to our process that's even started. We've not even discussed one. What's happened is that we've said we want to hire an architect to come in to work with us to get input from the public as to what they'd like to see, and also and then try to recapture what people do like in this community, and that is the look of the existing town hall. We want to try and recapture as much of that as possible, because, but at the same time, modernize it to the point where we can address it with an elevator, with all the structural requirements that are required under the new state building codes, and have an envelope that is much more energy efficient than the one we currently have, and use many of the energy efficient materials that are now available that weren't available back in the 60s.
Right. One of the, when we're talking about costs, and I know that there's a big debate about renovating versus building a new building. Is there cost involved if people had to be moved out of Town Hall to a different space for renovation? I mean, is that a significant cost?
Well, the only thing that we can estimate, and it's, again, the working group is made up of 14 or 15 folks with varying backgrounds, ones who architects, engineers, planners, building trades folks, and so people that really know buildings, and also folks that have been involved in previous projects in this town. And they can only go by what was the most recent project, which was the library. And the library had to be moved, the whole staff had to be moved, and the materials. And that cost somewhere around, I think the estimate was around $32,000 a year, or somewhere in that range. I take that back. It was like $10,000, but the space requirements for a town hall would run somewhere in the order of about $32,000 to $35,000, based on the most recent estimate that was in from the leasing estimate that we looked at. And that's the cost per square foot to lease space. So by doing that, if you calculate and we used an estimate of 15.5 as a building requirement, maybe it's a little bit less, maybe it's a little bit more, depending upon how it ultimately shapes out. But if it's 15,000 square feet, you're probably looking at close to $350,000 to $400,000 for over a 12-month period, assuming that it takes 12 months to build it. If it could take longer, it could take less, it could take less, it could take longer. So
those are significant costs.
$300,000 to $400,000 is nothing to not look at. So we really have to think about that. Our goal is to try and build the new building in the parking lot directly behind the existing building, and that way we can stay in the building while it's being constructed. Parking will be a little bit of a challenge, we know that, but we'll try and figure out that and work with an architect or an engineer to figure that out. But I think it's it's certainly doable based upon what we see in being done in Boston and other projects all over the place, that those kinds of things are figured out.
Well, my experience is with Disney.
Oh, there you go.
And I know that when they're building something new, there are just walls you're walking by, and there's maybe some construction sound, but it's really not anything that seems to be bothersome.
No, it isn't. And it'll be disruptive.
If they take the time to really set it up the way it should be. Yeah.
And it'll be disruptive to a degree. Construction typically is. But I have to give the employees kudos here, because they put up with a lot over the past several years with the conditions that are there. And that's not self-serving. I mean, it's true. I mean, folks have really been in a very difficult scenario there. And I think that they will even welcome the idea of a little bit of disruption and inconvenience.
With a light at the end of the tunnel.
With a light at the end of the tunnel. That's not a train, by the way,
right.
coming in. So yeah, and I really do think that they will be fine with that, and because they've been very cooperative up to this point. I don't see that changing at all. I think folks will truly be appreciative of the fact that they're getting something new.
One of the other things that had been bounced around before was the idea of renting or leasing rather than even considering building a building. Wasn't there a study done about those costs?
There was, and that study revealed that it wasn't the right way to go. And here's the fundamental reason why it doesn't work, is the fact that we don't own the land underneath it, and we don't own the building itself. And leasing something, you're always paying a sort of a capital cost into that process. And I think that if we could do it, and if more people would do it, if it made sense, more people would do it.
Right.
A lot of people don't do it.
Right.
And that's the fundamental difference here, is that we don't own the land. And we have, when we did our analysis of all the different options, We looked at many folks know we looked at Payson Road as whether or not be an option to build there, and it was a lot of positives to why we wanted to go there, because economically there was a lot of positives to go with that. But at the end of the day, we decided that we really wanted to keep it in the center of town, because that really is the sentiment of the community as we understand it. All right, and I can only go based on what we understand today. And I think that's probably true, because once that decision was made, I never heard another word about it. So, and if it was really a wrong decision, I'm sure we would have heard about it.
Right.
But we haven't heard about it. So I think that really speaks well of that decision. So, and I think, again, leasing, and then move that, which means you would have to go to a different location.
Right.
By doing
So it's
that.
moving costs plus leasing.
Exactly, and it's leasing it. So it didn't really make sense when you figure it out from that perspective.
Right. And the town hall is the hub of the community. It's
That's
your
right.
kind of gateway to a town.
Right.
Do you want it to be in a commercial building? I don't
That's
know.
right.
That's
That's
another
right.
question, I think, too.
And I think that, I've actually had experience in those areas in my most recent job where I had experience in that particular area. And at the end of the day, folks felt pretty strongly about keeping town hall in the center of town. And there's an historical connection that people have
Right.
with the town hall being in the center of town, and people feel comfortable with that. And some folks who have moved it out have regretted it later. It also has worked in some areas, so I can't, you have to say it both ways, but I think generally speaking, if you were to ask most people, they'll say, geez, I kind of like the idea where it's located.
So when we have, at town meeting in November, what is it we're really being asked to vote for or against?
Right, well, the answer is that we're asking folks to support an article, which I believe is Article 3, that will will pay for the soft costs. And the soft costs are the architects and planners and engineers to design this new building. And then we'll also pay for, at the same time, in that same amount of money, we'll pay for what is known as an overall project manager, or the short term is OPM. And that's required now under the state laws when you build a capital infrastructure, anything over $100,000, I believe, or $1 million. I'm not 100% sure on that point. But it requires that you have to have an overall project manager for that project. So we're going to deal with that at town meeting. And we don't know what that number is at this point, and the reason why we don't is because we're actually going out to bid on it right now. And we've had over 40 people take out bid specifications. Yesterday we had about 13 show up on site visits. So that tells us there's about 13 folks that are really serious about this. So that's a good sign. That's a good number of folks looking at this. And then the OPM process is in addition to that as well. But they'll all be one amount of money for this project, and that's the amount that we'll ask for. So we did present to the AdCom the other night, the advisory committee, and got a pretty favorable response. They haven't voted on it yet, but generally speaking, I think there was a lot of support for the work that we've been doing.
So these soft costs are really to help us determine what the plan will be, what the true costs will be.
Yes.
Based on the square feet and the type of building we have
Right.
and where the building will be located. So
Right.
it's really going to be giving us a lot more information about
Right.
building a new building.
And I think that's accurate. I'm glad you sort of pointed that out, because it's actually this is different from what we've traditionally done in this town. From what I'm told, people said that we've actually taken one number and gone to town meeting and said, okay, vote for this entire project. We've done it differently this time, and I think it was actually done a year ago when they asked for this money as well. But what happened is that we've broken that out, because by doing it this way, it gives the voting public the understanding of what it costs to design the building. And then also, it'll be the ability to then go out to bid, to design it, and then go back for the actual construction costs after we've already bid it. So we know what the actual numbers are going to be like.
So those
at
will be
that
the
point.
real, true, hard numbers.
That's right. Those are the numbers that we're looking at. And so I think that really is going to be helpful for the public. I've heard the concern or the questions that, well, if you're going to town meeting, then if you vote the plan, then you're gonna then you're most likely going to want to vote for the project. Well, it's true, but you can't have it both ways. I mean, if you want that information broken out, you have to be able to accept the fact that this is this is how we've done it to try to provide more information and more openness towards the process so people understand what we're voting on.
And in reality, other projects that we've done, those costs were just part of the bigger number that
That's
people voted on. They paid for it.
Exactly,
They
yeah.
it just wasn't broken out separately like this.
Right. And just one last point on the article. We are planning to pay for this project. At least our plan is to pay for this money with for the soft costs with free cash, which is available funds. In other words, we don't need to borrow for that. We have the money available to pay for that.
Oh, that's a really excellent point.
Yeah, and it's important because some folks will say, well, you're doing that because it's a majority versus a 2/3 majority. That is absolutely true, and we're not shying away from that. The thing that makes sense to me, though, financially, is and this is something as a manager I can advocate for, is that you never want to borrow for something you can pay for,
Right.
because you're paying for the additional interest cost and everything else that goes with that. The capital project, absolutely, you really should borrow for that because that's a much bigger impact on your budget and your operating scale. And we're trying to pay for that within the existing ability of the town to pay for that without going to a 2.5 override or a debt exclusion rather. We want to try and not do that. I don't know if we'll be successful, but we're really trying not to do that.
But funding this will give us the true numbers to know what
Yes.
that would mean for people in terms of their taxes.
That's right. And like I said, we're trying to pay for the entire project within existing revenues or within our ability to pay within existing tax structures, so as opposed to asking for additional capacity. So I think that's our goal. We're trying really hard to do that. I've got an excellent group of folks that are working on this committee. And even those who disagree on the committee, I think it's very, very important to have that disagreement because we have that debate, and I've said this in other forums, it keeps me balanced in terms of how understanding the issues and why people feel so strongly about certain issues. And so that once I know that, we can then charter our course accordingly. At the end of the day, we have to come up with a decision, and we've done that. A recommendation that we're very comfortable with. But I think the process has been a very, very good process, and it's been very helpful to me as a new person on the block.
Well, and I just have to tell you how much I appreciate how open you are about you have coffee and conversation at the senior center regularly, and you're going to be a speaker at men's breakfast, and I think that you've done due diligence to try to get a lot of to be available to people and to be able to answer questions. And I know the last time that you were at the senior center, people were saying, this was the best meeting. I just felt like I learned so much just from coming this, because they can have their own questions answered.
Sure. Yep.
So thank you for doing that.
No, I actually I love working with the seniors. I'm in my previous positions, 2 positions as the chief executive, I've always taken time to work with the seniors because I have a lot of respect for the seniors. I'm getting there myself, by the way. I'm working towards that goal. But quite honestly, I've enjoyed immensely working with the seniors. People here have been very, very good, and they give me a lot of good insight because knowing the history of the community is important of how we can charter our future.
Right.
And it's really important that we understand and don't forget the past. It's important that we build off of that as opposed to just dismiss it. So,
Great.
Okay.
Did you have anything else you wanted to say about the project, or you think we're?
No, I think we've pretty much covered it. I think it's been a great process. I think there's a lot of other good things going on in town other than this project, and I think and it's been great. I mean, I've been really enjoyed getting around to see folks and to get immersed in the stadium issues as well, and getting to know Mr. Kraft and his organization. I'm really looking towards building that relationship much stronger than it's been, and hopefully it'll be the strongest it'll ever be over the course of the next few years. And we're really working towards that and towards that goal. And there's a lot of great things on the horizon. I just recently hired a very capable assistant, Mary Beth Bernard, who will be starting on Monday, October 6th. And just a terrific gal, and I'm really looking forward to her level of expertise that she brings to our organization with respect to HR issues, as well as organizational development, and just her understanding of government in and of itself is going to be a really big addition for us. So I'm looking forward to that.
Great.
Okay.
Well, thanks for tuning in, and if you want to talk to Bill Keegan directly, come to Coffee and Conversation at the Senior Center. It's on Wednesdays at 12:30. And thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, let's see.